Welcome to the MIT Innovation Program podcast. This is a repository of insights by thought leaders and practitioners of innovation where they speak about their views, insights, and experiences. Come join us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Healthcare Innovations for Today. My name is Priya Dhawan, and I'll be your moderator. I work as the head of collaborations, branding, and outreach at the MIT ID Innovation Program, and I'm excited to be hosting the session today with Nitin. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Nitin Sisodia. Nitin is a national awardee from President of India for Innovation and Technology. I wish there were audio claps, Nitin. I'm really missing that right now. Founder and CEO of Sohum Innovation Lab, a social enterprise to develop novel solutions to improve health and income of people living in underserved regions. A 2010 Stanford India Biodesign Fellow. He was one of the top 20 Indian innovators by MIT Tech Review 2013. Nitin has received the NASSCOM ICT-led Healthcare Innovation Award, the Indian Merchant Chamber Inclusive Innovation Award, and the Sankalp India Award. He completed his Bachelors in Electrical Engineering from NIT Bhopal and Masters in Industrial Design from the National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad. Nitin is a Mathematics Olympiad awardee, wrote 2 books on mathematics that simplifies and explains complex concepts of advanced mathematics. He loves to jam with people, cook, brew coffee, write, and travel during his free time. We are truly lucky to have him here. He has presented several webinars, and today he's going to talk about the healthcare-focused innovations. Before we proceed to listen to Nitin, I have a few updates to share about the session and the MIT ID Innovation Program webinar platform. Firstly, today's webinar will have the speaker share his insights for the first half hour, followed by a Q&A session facilitated by me in the latter half hour. Next, we'd love to hear from you during today's webinar. So if you have a question for our speaker, please feel free to send it through the Ask a Question tab at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be answering questions at the end of the session. And just in case we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we'll surely follow it up later. The webinar will be available after the session on YouTube. The link has been shared in the chat earlier today. And all future webinars will also be accessible through the same link that you're using now. We'd like to encourage you to share today's webinar with your social networks. You can use the social sharing icons which have been shared earlier and stay connected as well. Lastly, this curated series on healthcare innovations for today, it'll feature a variety of industry thought leaders, speakers who are a part of the MIT ID innovation ecosystem. MIT here stands for the 4-decade-old Maharashtra Institute of Technology. ID stands for MIT's 15-year-old Institute of Design. And the latest offering, the 1-year innovation program, which aims to create a new breed of comprehensive innovators, informed by design thinking, influenced by future technologies and trends, and inspired to make their own mark in the global political, social, economic, and technological scenario. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome our speaker, Mr. Nitin Sisodia. Nitin, thank you so much, and over to you. Looking forward to hear all that you have to share.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you for arranging this webinar. I guess this is a very appropriate time when we start thinking about healthcare, and we should all come together to solve our own problems with our own tools. So thank you so much for arranging this. I thank you the whole MIT team, Tejas, Priya, and Mr. Harshit for organizing such a fantastic series, fantastic speakers. And I would love to share my journey with every one of you. So my introduction goes as a founder and CEO of Sohum Innovation Lab, which I started in 2012. But I'll give you a glimpse of how my innovation and the design journey has started and what made me do what I'm doing right now. So tell you about my background. I basically lived most of my life in small towns and villages of India, and I know India in a way that I understand the problems. I understand how people perceive problems, how the type of solutions which might work in these environments, and how can we make it sustainable. I think that is something which is at the core of any design thinking or innovation process, that you understand the ecosystem very well. So I did my electrical engineering, and I think that is what has given me a perspective to solve the problem. I guess like many of you must be having a technical or a technology oriented background, or even like healthcare background. I think if you have an innate curiosity to look at problems and understand them, and then know there are tools available, and you know how to combine them to find a solution, I think that is what is required, the rational approach initially. So that is something what I say is how to solve the problem. So most of the time we understand how to solve the problem. So that's why we always come up with a solution whenever we see a problem, and it's like more or less very impromptu. But as I progressed, I went to National Institute of Design to do my post-graduation in industrial design. There I somehow understood it better, that it's very important to understand the why of the design process. Like, why should you design? Why should you solve a problem? I think that is another very important part of the process, because if you don't know why you are solving it, then most of the times even the solutions, they are very appealing or very attractive, they might not fit into the scenario. So this is again a very, very important aspect of design or innovation process, that you understand the why of it. So analytical mind will always look at how to solve the problem, but a slightly more progressive mindset is to understand why to solve the problem, right? So there is a how and there is a why. And as I was like working in the industry, I realized I worked with a bicycle industry. I designed bicycles for small town teenagers. I with Hercules BSA. Then I joined Maruti Suzuki. I was in India and Japan designing cars. So some of the cars are out there in the road. And I learned a lot from my team, and also understood like how a concept goes into a complete product, what kind of processes that you follow to make a product out of a concept. So I think that is another journey that I have gone through. That has led me to question more that what to design. So after my industrial experience, I went to do my postdoc fellowship at Stanford, where I did my biodesign fellowship. It's a very interesting program where you focus on healthcare needs, and that is what my orientation is about at this moment. That I'm trying to solve some of the healthcare needs of India. So I got an exposure to advanced healthcare system at Stanford Hospital and many other such settings. I could see how sophisticated the healthcare systems work, and how basically they deal with any kind of a complex problem. But when I came back to India, because my program was sponsored by Department of Biotechnology, I got a chance to serve AIMS for 2 years, and there I saw many unmet clinical needs. And in fact, that is something which has really opened my eyes to the developing world problems. Like, it is something which is very different. In fact, I would like to share one of the insight that I got while I was in the field. And it's a very interesting story. I was in a child development clinic, and a parent walked in. I was in New Delhi, and a parent walked in from one of the small town in Haryana. And they said they brought their kid along with them. He was like 4.5 years old, and said, "Ye bolta nahi hai." So he's not able to speak. And the doctor took some time, examined the boy, and uh, after examining said he is not able to hear, that's why he is not able to speak. ये सुनता नहीं है इसलिए बोलता नहीं है. So that was something which was very devastating for the parents. And the doctor added to that that it is already too late to do any intervention, because if you had have done hearing screening of the child, and if you would know about it earlier, we could have done something. But now it is already too late to do any intervention. So this was something which could have been changed had the baby been screened at the time of birth. But it didn't happen because we don't have appropriate technologies. We don't have healthcare providers who can conduct these tests. And also, even if we buy some of the expensive imported equipments, there are expensive disposables associated with that. With that. And they many a times won't perform in these resource poor settings. So there were many constraints of using technology or making it conducive for resource poor setting. So that is what I derived from that situation. But I didn't stop at that stage, and started making some prototypes, like why are we not making our own technologies? And that is how I've come across the idea of making our own technologies here in India, and I started Sohum Innovation Lab. And we developed the gold standard device, which is a similar kind of a technology which is used in the US or any other advanced healthcare system. But we made it conducive for resource poor settings. So our algorithms are patented, and they perform in noisy environments. We don't require expensive disposables. It can be used by any healthcare worker. And it is a very sophisticated technology in which we acquire brain signals. So we utilized our own resources, like all the engineers in my team are from India. We developed our own set of tools. We developed our the whole product design has happened over here. So we have designed something which is very sophisticated, and have proven to the world that we can solve our own problems. And currently the newborn hearing screening device is out there in many government hospitals. Tripura, Himachal Pradesh, some 18 districts are using it. Many prestigious institutes across India, even private healthcare chains like Apollo, Manipal are using the device. And we have screened thousands of babies. Close to 112 babies have been identified with hearing loss, and they have all got early intervention, and we could save their speech for lifetime, and we could save them from lifelong disability by this simple intervention. So just to give you a glimpse of like what can be done in India is this one example, that if we understand our problems very well, if we take the courage, if we really acquire the right type of resources, get the right team in place, we can really create wonders. And in fact, this technology now we are exporting to other countries. So right now, our devices are working in Tanzania, Uganda, Guatemala. So global turf is open for healthcare products, and then we should do things for global innovation, global healthcare innovation. And so that is what my message is. So having said that, I would like to emphasize on a couple of points in here. Sometimes we don't know the process of healthcare innovation, or like from where to start. I think the whole journey starts from people. So it's very important that you understand the context of the person whom you are meeting or whom you are seeing going through a kind of a healthcare problem. I think that is where the crux is, and you should look for unique insights, and that is what we always do. There are many kind of situations which will happen in front of you, and you will try to jump onto immediate conclusions, like the way it is happening in the COVID scenario, where there are some of the needs which are very on the surface and which are definitely required to be noticed and solved, but there are many underlying needs also, which can be unique insights and which can be solved. So but it is all oriented around people, like how people are like going through a kind of a care cycle, or how people are suffering because of lack of care cycle, and similar kind of things. So I firmly believe in observation. So one should definitely observe a lot, and try to note down as much as possible about the healthcare scenario that they are looking at. Try to do every kind of observation which is around a need. For example, if we are observing needs around COVID, so it is not just the requirement of personal protective equipments. There are many underlying issues. For example, how people are being treated in ICU. Are there any special kind of monitorings which are required? Can we do some kind of monitorings at home? Can there be like different kind of thermal sensors rather than just temperature monitoring? There can be how this whole scenario is going to change the life of people in the coming months, because it is going to be a very different world. So many of the needs are going to emerge in the coming time. So one should try to note down as many problems as possible, and then try to evaluate like which problem to solve, like which is something which is solvable and which can create impact. So this brings me to the the other 2 points. I always believe in technology, and like I think that is something which can create a differentiator. In India, you have accessibility to a lot of these technologies which can be smartly used to create a difference. Definitely, one should believe in that and should try to utilize those smaller or bigger opportunities to combine these solutions. But at the same time, you should not get too influenced by technology, to just keep on just thinking about technology. There are certain kind of behavioral changes also which you can brought out as a solution. So also look at that aspect of design thinking. And the third point that I want to stress on, the first one was definitely people, like how are you going to observe people, how are you going to observe needs around those scenarios. The second is definitely the technology point, and the third one is about impact. So whenever you are doing any kind of healthcare need, you should be aware of the type of impact that you are going to create. So is it going to really save the life of somebody? Is it going to improve um, the morbidity associated with it? Or is it going to make somebody's life easier? So think it from that perspective, because that is again a great motivator, or I would say um, the final outcome of the project, which is important from design thinking perspective. That is going to be very fruitful. So I will also like to add one more example that we have solved in our lab, which is not exactly related to emergency medicine or any such health, any newborn care need, but it is a very different problem which we tried solving with one of the multinational corporation called as Zeiss. So Zeiss came to us with a problem that we want to make a $2 glass for India. Like we want to provide affordable glasses, the spectacles for the masses. So we took some time, we researched, and we found out like why people are not using spectacles. So if you go to some of the suburban or smaller towns, smaller villages, not many people who you would see wearing spectacles. So when we interviewed them, we realized that it is not because they can't afford a pair of spectacles, but there are a lot of innovation in getting themselves screened. And even for screening, they have to travel to some of the other towns or bigger centers, and then buy a pair of spectacles. Then they again have to travel back to collect that pair of spectacles. So imagine if someone is elderly, or if there are women, children in the house, they mostly don't get that opportunity to travel so far and get themselves a pair of spectacles. And also, the traveling would involve a lot of cost. At the same time, it would turn out to be more expensive than the pair than the spectacle itself. So this was the scenario, and we presented the scenario, and we realized that we really need to enable screening in villages. Like, how can we enable somebody in the village itself to do the screening, or make optometrists or ophthalmologists available in the villages? And this program we started 4 years back, and it has become very successful. So we made the solution more accessible by understanding the real need or insight of the process. So the traveling part we have reduced to almost nil, and everybody is getting screening at their doorstep. So we conduct camps. We also create local entrepreneurs who enable optometry in the village itself. We also use a part of telemedicine to make it possible to get consultation from an ophthalmologist. So this is a program called as Aluka Vision Program. You can look up on the website of Zeiss. And so far, it has screened more than 1.2 lakhs people, and like more than 40,000 people have got access to affordable glasses. So it's a kind of a system solution that we presented, but at the starting of it, we really focused on the people and their need and the system, so as to understand clearly that what do we need to solve. So I think that is what is at the crux of healthcare innovation, that you really understand the need very well, and then you apply appropriate technology, and then assess the impact. So I guess this is what is at the core of any innovation in healthcare, which happens. And I'm also very would love to emphasize on the biodesign process, which I've learned. Maybe in the next sessions we can actually focus on that. But that really tells you about how to select the right clinical need. Like, if you go out and start observing some of these needs in healthcare setups, you may find hundreds and hundreds of needs to solve. But which need to solve is what biodesign process teaches you. And I guess that is what we will be focusing on the next webinars or next sessions. So yeah, that is what I have at this moment. And Priya, is it fine, like, if you open up for questions? Because I think there is too much which I have already put out there. And if there are like many any kind of specific questions that I can take up, because I don't want to really fill in too much information out there.
No, it's pretty much a case of you're 6 minutes away from time. So I think, yes, questions are most welcome. I would, in fact, like to check with you that, so you studied technology, and then there was a slight movement moving towards design full-fledgedly, right? So if you can make people understand that, when does that switchover happen, or in terms of how do you realize when you wanted to kind of, delve deeper into innovation, and then the need to actually get educated in a structured way so that you could actually bring your ideas, your vision to reality?
Sure. I think my whole intention of going from technology to design or innovation happened at the time when I could realize how can I convert my ideas into more tangible products. And in fact, to be very frank, my first such idea was to write a book, which I don't know how it happened, but I was like just observing many of these students from engineering colleges. They many of you would associate with that they find the engineering mathematics very difficult, because when you graduate from 12th, you mostly learn like differential equation or like some of the very basic stuff. But when you go into engineering, you suddenly see like some of the very imaginary mathematics which comes into the picture. And many of the students would fail in mathematics. So that was my observation at that point of time. And I was still in my final year of my engineering. And I suggested this idea to a publisher, saying that, this is something which can work out, and there are not much material, a comprehensive material available. There were books available, but it is not really oriented towards making complex problems of mathematics to be in a simpler way. So I just changed that idea into something which is more tangible, and that really motivated me to really do it iteratively. And that is how I actually moved from engineering to design. And I was really fascinated to create products. I think that is what is at the core. But then I slowly realized that it is not only about making product, but it is about solving problems, like, which is at the core.
We've got two questions coming in out here. We'll start with Abhishek Gaurav, wanting to know that how did you bring the price of the specs to $2?
Yeah, it's more of a supply chain question, but definitely actually any pair of spectacle, if you see it, it is just a piece of plastic, and in fact, it is now there are no more glasses or like the pure glass which is being used. It is like completely plastic. So and once you do injection molding, once you do like mass production, it is very much feasible to make anything. It is just like some few grams of plastic which goes into it, and the mold cost which you can figure out, or which you can amortize in a period of time. So it is very much possible to make a pair of spectacle in $2. Like, but it is not specifically $2. It is somewhere around. Actually, it is somewhere around 100 rupees. In fact, lesser than $2 now. So there are margins that we add onto it, so that the local entrepreneur who is out there in the village, who should also earn from it, and there is some margin for some of the other camp organizers and other things. So you should also think about the value in the supply chain, and the spectacle will reach to the end customer at the price of some $3 or $3.50, so that everyone should earn from the system or the supply chain, and then that's how you design a sustainable business model.
Saurabh Gupta would like to know that can you briefly discuss about key aspects in impact analysis?
Yeah, it's a pretty relevant question, that how do you do impact assessment? So at the start, like when you're looking at some of the problems to solve, or when you're starting your innovation process, and if some need comes in front of you, there are kind of different kind of impact analysis that you can do. You can look at the clinical impact of a problem. For example, you can figure out, like, if you're going to solve this problem. For example, if I'm going to design something which is meant for ICU setting, so maybe the number of people which I can save from adverse events is going to be less, but clinically it is going to avoid a lot of morbidity. So the clinical impact of the problem is high, but when you look at the market impact of the same problem, it might not be very high, because it will be reaching few thousands of people, or few thousands of ICU settings. So do you have the right business impact, and do you really want to solve the problem, comes into the picture. So there are like a couple of indicators that you have to put it into your screening process while you're selecting the problem, that what kind of impact that you are focusing on. Do you really want to make a clinical impact? Do you want to really focus on business impact? You want to like really make it reach to each and every person around the world, or you want to really create a great IP from that product, and then maybe sell it off to some other bigger organization. So it depends on your focus, and that is how you basically look at the impact of the product. But the clinical impact then again can be taken down into modules of morbidity, mortality, how the healthcare provider is getting influenced by that. Like, for example, if you may make the life of the doctor or the nurse much easier. So that is also another kind of impact that you may create. So I guess like there are many verticals of impact that you can jot down, and then further subdivide that into factors so that you get the right finding out of that.
Sure. Thanks, Nitin. I wanted to understand from you, since again you've been working extensively in the healthcare innovation space, which country, according to you, is, I think, the best domain or the best platform for product makers, ideators to really bring their healthcare innovations to life? So just like how we have a technology hub, for example, which country, according to you, is the healthcare innovations hub?
Yeah, definitely. US is taking the lead in there because they have started thinking about it much before than the rest of the world, and they
Right.
have this whole intellectual property or that entrepreneurship mindset,
Mhm.
and healthcare is one of the very interesting area to do entrepreneurship
Mhm.
because of certain factors. I can actually focus on that, like if you would like me to tell you about that.
Sure.
But first, let me answer the question that why US is a better
Mhm.
ecosystem for
Right.
healthcare innovation, and like why do you see many companies, small or bigger, which comes out of that place? Primarily, it is because of the mindset of uh, providing a better care. Like one thing is that, another is you get a better access to capital, which is another requirement for healthcare innovation. And the third one, a very important part of it is the vendors. The vendors and the prototype makers and the people, the required speciality is available in that ecosystem. For example, if you want to make a catheter,
Mhm.
you will find a vendor who would be making just specialized catheter. And if you have a innovative design, you can tweak it around. You can actually ask them to do that, and then you will get the first proof of concept or prototype in a very quick manner.
Mhm.
So I think those are the things which really help some of the healthcare innovations to come out, and that is what I've realized. Second is like people are very open to system-based solutions. So even if you pitch some of the solutions which are system-oriented, for example,
True.
I'll give you an example of that, which are there are products which are data oriented, like which
Mhm.
basically the device cost is going to be very less, but it is going to acquire very crucial information of the patient,
Right.
um, which is going to be fed into the artificial intelligence platform, and then you are going to make a better decisive tool for saving the life of the person or improving the life of the person. I think those type of ideas are also very well funded in the US. So I think these couple of factors, like the availability of human resource, the availability of prototypers, and second is the availability of right mindset in the VC community. I think those are the few factors which really make that ecosystem thrive. Another interesting ecosystem to observe is Israel. So Israel is also getting a lot of healthcare innovations, and
Mhm.
they are very pretty aggressive both in agriculture and healthcare at this moment.
And fine, that's about US, that's about Israel, and I totally agree with what you had to share. Where do you see India currently? Uh, I think necessarily in the pre-COVID area. We'll come to the during COVID area later.
Yeah.
But where do you see India, actually going ahead with a innovative mindset?
Well, it's a very interesting question. I've been, uh, looking at this whole scenario from the last 10 years,
Mhm.
since the time I joined the biodesign program. And
Right.
I have seen it being very progressive. The whole entrepreneurship scenario has changed a lot. Many new startups and smaller, bigger product-based startups have come out, and even service-based startups have come out. So it's a very good scenario for products or services which have a quick turnaround. Like, you really need products or services which has a lesser gestation period. Generally in healthcare, which is like very complex, like the type of product that we have invented, which is based on brain signal acquisition, the lead time for making prototypes is high. The making of product is very sophisticated. So you require a lot of time to really prove the technology, and then you put it out in the clinical trials, and then take regulatory approvals and things like that. So it has a easy gestation period of 4 to 5 years. But I guess like we being at the starting of this whole innovation cycle, we are focusing on something which can come out much quicker, so that we can get to see the success factor of healthcare innovation. But I think we have a great opportunity at our disposal. We have understanding of resource poor settings, which not many other innovators would be having. For example, in advanced healthcare systems, they do have access to good technology and product makers and funding and other things. But we have this unique understanding of resource poor settings. So 90% of the world has similar or a kind of a same requirement, and so we are more apt, or we are more equipped, or we have a better understanding to solve healthcare needs of the developing world. So we have access to a global market. So that is what I would say. Not many products which are designed for advanced healthcare settings might work in the developing world, but products which are designed specifically for India or like for similar settings might work in Africa or like in South America, and in many resource poor settings. And there can be a trend where we can have a reverse innovation, where our products can be supplied back to the US or to the Europe. So we can really change that scenario as well.
Saurav Gupta would like to know what are ways to take innovation to global level and how you make collaboration in the country. I think partially it's been answered right now, but yeah, if you would still like to add a few more inputs to that.
So taking products to the global level, I guess like it is a journey in itself. It is almost like launching a new entity in that region. I'll share my experience taking our product to Tanzania. We were pretty naive when we got an order from Tanzania, and like we appointed some people to deal with those orders. So initially, we didn't know how to send the product. We didn't know how to train the people over there. We didn't know if there are any problems out there, how to service the product, things like those. So there are many smaller, bigger things that you really have to plan. We did it like pretty much on the go, but I would urge every one of you, like if you're thinking of making something available in any other geography, you should learn a lot and set up a process. So as to see yourself some resources, also try to use some of the technology. So the part of sending product has been handled pretty well, because we have had tie-up with one of the local distributor. And but when it comes to training, like we used some of these tools like online training, and we have supplied them material in their local language. Also, we took multiple sessions with their healthcare workers to make them understand the technology and do a lot of troubleshooting. So we spend a lot of time online over video calls, and to really train the healthcare workers over there to use the technology, because that makes or breaks the technology. When it goes out in the field, you don't know how they are going to be using the product. And then once, if something fails, then there will be repercussions of that. So you always want to provide the best of the quality and best of the training to the regions which are beyond your control. So in India, you can obviously travel, you can go around, you can connect, and you can provide the services. But when it comes to overseas, you have to take extra steps. You have to put in extra energy to make things make the quality as per the mark.
Sure. Thank you, Nitin. There's a lot of talk going on regarding 3D printing. Could you simplify it for the participants?
Well, personally, have not. I'm not using many 3D printed parts. We always go for injection molded parts. Um, but I definitely see at the prototype stage, you can use some of those proof of concepts to solve some of the, the the issues of product design. And in fact, it is a very good way um, to find out if there are any flaws before you go for the final product. But there can be many aspects to that. Like 3D design can be used for the smaller parts, and maybe then you can make it a complete prototype later on. But apart from 3D printing, I would also suggest people to look at vacuum forming and quick prototyping with the help of existing parts. Like sometimes for a proof of concept you may not go for 3D printing, but you prove the principle with the help of some other kind of catheters or some of the other available material. So even look at that aspect to prove the concept.
We have Abhishek wanting to know, how do you see the data aspect and the use of ML/DL infused with design for healthcare innovation?
Yeah, very pertinent question at this point of time. In fact, I think how we should progress in Indian healthcare scenario is that we should try to build in some of these data aspect right from the beginning in the products, so that we can take advantage of it at a later state. So just to give you an example of how we are kind of designing our products. So all our devices are telemedicine enabled. And as we have deployed the product in Tripura, let's say, or in Himachal Pradesh, we, to a large extent, reduce the the requirement of a specialist by the bedside or with the product. So our devices are automated, like it gives you kind of a pass refer as a result. So there is an integrated intelligence in the device so as to take a decision. So one level is that, but the second level is that our data also gets mined, or it gets churned in at the server level, and we have these AI engines which basically takes decision on top of it. So we increase the sensitivity, specificity of the decision making of the device tremendously. And I'm seeing that this type of technology is not existing even in the products which are imported, or like many of the other sophisticated products which are available. So we definitely have an advantage of numbers. We can build these tools. We can churn this data. We can really make very attractive algorithms on top of it. So I think that in the next 10 years, that is what is going to happen, that the price of the devices are going to go down, but it is the data which is going to be the gold. So, well, most of you would be knowing about it from your experience, but this is something which you have to integrate into your products. That is what I would suggest. So it has like definitely a lot of application in healthcare innovations, especially when you don't have trained healthcare workers, you don't have a specialist available in the field along with the devices, or so you have to do those decision makings remotely, and that is how we should deal with a mammoth size healthcare system which we have at this moment. So I'll just also like try to elaborate that even in COVID situation, we can use, or we can design some of the tools. In fact, we proposed one such tool to the government of India, that how can we monitor some of the patients remotely, even at home or even in ICU settings, and can do the decision making remotely rather than being everyone like a specialist doctor available with every patient. How can you really do the data analysis and can make some decisions on these patients, like which is critical, which is not critical, remotely. So yeah, so I think like that is the way to go.
And what other innovations do you see will improve the situation, the current COVID-19 situation? What's your assessment of, for how many months more do you think this needs more focus on? I believe, for example, like COVID is in a way here to stay because it's again a virus, and in multiple different forms, it is just going to keep on recurring down the years. But at a current situation level, what would you recommend? What is the right approach for us? And what kind of new things do you feel that we are going to be also coming to see in the near future? Very specific to COVID.
Yeah, no, it's a very difficult question actually to answer. But what I would say is that I'm seeing this whole COVID situation as another challenge in front of us. Like all of us are very kind of trained to see challenging situations, and we know how to like cope up with the situation. So it is just a new lifestyle. It's a new way of dealing with things. Just that we need to be more sensitive towards each other, towards the society, towards the environment, towards the way we deal with things. It is not just our safety, but also the safety of others. So that is, if we really cling on to that part, I think we can deal with it in a much better way than the rest of the world. So far, like we have seen a lot of maturity as a nation, and I guess definitely we would to take care of this. But I also imagine that there is another challenge of lack of clarity. So most of us would not be having lack of clarity like what is going to be the future, like whether it is related to your education, your profession, your goals, your the next steps that you need to take. So that is it's a kind of a hazy situation for all of us, and the task that is in front of us is that we need to really bring in more clarity to each to these tasks, all in all. In terms of healthcare innovations in COVID, I think this is the time when we all should try to pick one problem. Like not everyone should solve the problem of let's say finding or designing a new ventilator, because it's a very complicated and a very sophisticated machine. Not many people would be able to do justice to that in this short period of time. So let the people established people do their job. But there are many smaller needs, as I told you earlier in the talk, that we really need to observe for those needs. Like what are those needs of elderly people, let's say. How are they going to deal with the situation, because they are at a very high risk, and we really need to provide a good isolation to them, but at the same time we really need to take care of their needs. So what are those needs that we can take care of? And similarly, like there are many healthcare workers, for them the protection is very important. So how can you really design some kind of sensors? How can you bring behavioral changes in the society? So there are these like kind of underlying needs which needs to be addressed, and I see it as a big opportunity for all of us to really design something or bring in new ideas so that somebody can make a product or services around that. So yeah, sky's the limit at this point.
True. So I guess with every crisis, like they say, there's always an opportunity, right? With every dark cloud, there's a silver lining. I think the necessity out here would be to now start thinking creatively and actually start innovating and start from where you are. For example, yes, we're all staying at home, but I think if you watch the immediate circle more closely, that's where you recommend. That's how we start identifying problems, and then of course figuring out that whether they need solving or not. But however, at least that kind of gives you a path to move up ahead right from where you are currently, right? With everybody kind of still working out of home, and then understanding that how do they actually contribute to all that is happening around courtesy COVID, and how do they start effectively doing something concrete to help the situation ahead. So one of those could be also like, let's say, setting up a lab, an innovation lab like yours. Saurabh Gupta would like to know that what were the key challenges you faced in setting up innovation labs like yours, be it funding, or is there any suggestions for someone who would want to set up such a lab? Basically, start innovating from where they are.
Yeah, uh, you really need good people. I guess like if you have a set of people who are specializing in their own areas, um, I think that team is one of the very important factor in setting up a lab. Um, Regarding funding, I would say funding is available, and both you know grants and risk money is available at this moment for healthcare needs. Just that you choose your needs very carefully. I think which your lab is going to solve. And that is going to really define whether you are going to make it or break it. So I think do a lot of research and introspection that how what kind of needs you are going to solve. So I guess like setting up an innovation lab maybe require two rooms, few equipments, a good team, and some motivated vendors, and yeah, I guess like funding will come. Like so, funding is pretty much available. BIREC, DBT. There are a few more other Millennium Alliance and Grand Challenges Canada. Some of these agencies are there out there to fund early stage companies and ideas. But they really look into the ideas that you are or the problems or the needs that you are trying to solve. So focus on that very well, define it very well, and make a good plan around it. And then yeah, the lab will be out making a change.
Sure. Thanks. Karan Singh Purohit wanted to know that if the innovation is for specific specialty or it will be catered to multiple specialty as per the ongoing and futuristic health impacts.
Sorry, I want to understand the question
I
better.
believe it would be as per the problem that one would want to actually start moving towards for solving. He said that I would want to know if the innovation is for specific specialty or it will be catered to multiple specialty as per the ongoing and futuristic health impacts.
Uh, I think it should be for a specific specialty in the beginning. You should take a deep dive in one area. For example, if you are trying to solve needs for ICU setting, I think you should then just take a deep dive solving problems in there. You understand the stakeholders, you understand what how you can save cost, time to them, so as to make that need more specific. So I always suggest that you should be more specific in terms of solving the innovation need. You should have that unique insight about an ecosystem, and or a specific area to solve. So definitely specific. There are some, if you have like, let's say, if you are trained in a kind of a specific area, let's say some kind of hardware design, then you always try to design some hardware tools to solve some of the problems. It's the other way around. Like you have a hammer and you're finding the nail. But what I would suggest is that for innovation, it is very important that you keep the your tool aside, and you just focus on the type of problem that you are going to solve, so as to understand the clinical market impact of that need, because it's very important that you solve some problem which is either solving some clinical need, or if it is having a good market impact, so that it becomes more sustainable to solve that problem. So all in all, you should wear the hat of an innovator than the hat of engineer, or like just because you have a tool, you want to use that to solve a problem. That is what my perspective is at this moment.
Thank you, Nitin. So innovation is industry agnostic in a way, right? It can also, of course, move beyond healthcare. Um, if somebody has, let's say, not studied engineering, if you could shed light in terms of how can anybody who wants to upskill, who wants to learn and add a differentiator to their education chain, what would you recommend that they do in terms of possibly opting for a more structured course to understand how to go about innovating? Would you recommend that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I always think that education is a very good investment to make on yourself. It opens up your mind to accept new ideas, also give you a process, a structured thinking process to solve problems or to achieve something which you intend to. And there are some structured courses like MIT ID Innovation Program is one such place where you can understand this. But there are design courses which gives you a glimpse of what needs to be solved, how it need to be, how what is the process around it, and how it should be solved. So yes, definitely an education program is important for you to understand, or like to train yourself to, if you want to delve into solving problems.
Sure. When designing innovations, how do you see the collaboration between policymakers, regulators, and innovators, especially given the data protection regime, which is also getting a massive push these days? This question is by Karthik Vishwanath. And what would be your insight?
Yeah, no, it's a very important aspect, the data protection part. So, for example, like if you're, I'm just giving a kind of a quick example on how do you really protect your data, what type of information you are going to take from the data. So that's like more of an ethical point of view, which an innovator has to ensure right from the point when they are designing their solutions, that if they are taking out data for research purpose, they should definitely take consent from the patients. You should definitely inform the care providers, or to the government, that you are going to be using this part of the data for research. So there are many companies. In fact, you must be knowing that Google has project with some of the state governments to analyze some of their information on the retinal imaging part. So government is like more flexible. Policymakers are more flexible, to share some kind of data. But definitely, you should have a very good understanding with these programs or the policymakers as you're designing the solutions, as you're providing the solutions. And you should take all necessary precautions, like ensuring your data is stored on HIPAA compliant servers, making sure that no patient information is being revealed, and making sure that whatever your your intention is, like even for research purpose, it should be met with the right type of consent being taken on the data part.
Thank you. And how is your work at home stint been currently?
Well, I, have most of the time I'm on the call with my team, which is spread across different regions. But definitely, we have programs with multiple hospitals. So many of the hospitals are now on a have shifted their focus towards COVID. So newborn hearing screening is at halt at this point of time. We also stopped many of the programs which we are running with Apollo and other places for some time, so as to make sure that the safety of our healthcare workers and also of the babies should be taken care. So yeah, things are in flux, but I see that we have to set up the right protocols, and sooner or later we will get back to things which we are doing, and we are refocusing on some of the things which we have lined up. So we are ramping up for FDA approvals and other things. So we are constructively using this time. So far so good. Yes.
I think great time for people who are innovating, because I think that time is really important to be able to delve deeper into the current set of issues and think in a very calm manner and come out with good solutions. I'd really like to thank you for your time today. Uh, Great listening into your journey and, of course, all your insights to all the questions that have been asked. Thank you to all the participants who joined in. We'll see you around in our next webinar. And another round of thanks to Nitin. Nitin, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
With this, we conclude today's webinar. Any further questions that you'd like to ask, we would be happy to have them answered by our guest speaker offline. Our next webinar in this curated series on healthcare innovations for today will be lined up on the 10th of April, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Our guest speaker will be Dr. Jagdish Chaturvedi. More details available on our social channels. For those who tuned in late, I'd like to share that MIT stands for the 4-decade-old Maharashtra Institute of Technology. ID stands for MIT's 15-year-old Institute of Design. And the one-year innovation program is the latest offering of MIT ID, which aims to create a new breed of comprehensive innovators, informed by design thinking, influenced by future technologies and trends, and inspired to make their own mark in the global political, social, economic, and technological scenario. Special thanks to all the participants once again for joining in, and we hope to see you soon again online on the 10th of April. Stay safe, stay home.